Hello again, Paul Mackey, and this is One Idjit's Thoughts on Podcast on day 26 of the Dog Days of Podcasting Challenge. We checked out the Lock Coffee House this morning on North 18th Avenue East in Duluth, a short walk from our house. That location had previously been the Golden Bulldog Pub, which was a short stumble to our house. When we got there, we ran into Luke, the morning guy from the radio station. Shortly after we got our coffee, the place was hopping. They have a tabletop gaming theme, so Darcy and I played a card game called Quiddler. I hope they stay in business because I think it could become a regular Saturday morning habit for us. And then I worked. I think I also worked during day 5 and 6 this month, but I believe I had those episodes mostly scripted ahead of time at that point, where now I'm doing everything same day. Anyway, I should get down to business with the Rockford Files and an episode called This Case is Closed, originally airing October 18th, 1974. Brief summary. Rockford is working for a rich man, Warner Jameson, attempting to suss out what Jameson's daughter Susan's fiancé has been up to. As is often the case, we start out with Rockford in the middle of the case, apparently with his life at risk, then flash back to see what got him to this point. The fiancé, Mark, doesn't sound like a risk to Rockford, but Jameson is certain the guy is dirty. Rockford tries to close the case, but Jameson strong-arms him with the threat of using his connections to make Rockford's business and life very difficult, civically speaking. When Rockford starts digging, it sounds like Jameson is right, and everyone wants to know who Jim's client is. The mob and the feds are involved, but the only one in the dark about the whole thing is Rockford. After Jameson tells Rockford he convinced Mark to break the engagement and that he's off the case, he still has to shake a tail. Then Susan Jameson herself wants to hire him to find out why Mark broke the engagement.
This is Jim Rockford. At the tone, leave your name and message. I'll get back to you.
You really want Shim on the 7? Come on, that nag couldn't go a mile in the back of a pickup truck. Call me.
Who is? Well, I'm still holding James Garner, Stephen J. Cannell, and Mike Post in reserve for when I can take a little more time. This episode has legendary guest actor Joseph Cotten and legend on her way up Sharon Gless. Joseph Cotten was one of Orson Welles' original Mercury Player theaters, and he appeared in a couple roles in Citizen Kane, as well as Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons and The Third Man. Sharon Gless started out with smaller television roles, including McCloud, Ironside, Adam 12, and The Bob Newhart Show. She worked with Stephen J. Cannell in Rockford Files in 2 roles, also in Black Sheep Squadron and TV movie Richie Brockelman, The Missing 24 Hours. After Rockford, she appeared in the Disney TV movie The Kids Who Knew Too Much and TV movie Revenge of the Stepford Wives, before being cast in 1982 in her iconic role as Christine Cagney on Cagney and Lacey, a series that played through 1988 and follow-up movies through 1996. Since then, she's worked steadily with series regular roles on Queer as Folk and Burn Notice, and single episode work through this year, guesting on Station 19 in February. This aged poorly. I know this spot is meant to highlight a cultural attitude of casual racism or sexism, but this time I'm going with the bumping Jim did at the lot gate at the beginning of the episode. These days there's no way a convertible waiting at a stop arm would let that incident go by with a simple exclaimed, "Hey." Heck, the guy rolled his junker pickup truck back into my junker Scion XB on a hill, and we both got out, took a peek at the bumpers before shaking hands and agreeing to let it go, just a few weeks back. I suppose it's also possible this whole thing was glossed over for plot convenience, though. Totally 70s. Okay, this is almost an artifactoid, but it's thin, and I didn't really find a totally 70s theme item this time. The Holiday Airlines desk is briefly seen at the airport at the start of the episode, and that does kind of lead into the artifactoid, so stay tuned. Holiday Airlines only had a 3-plane fleet in its short history from 1965 to 1975, 3 turboprop planes that flew service to Tahoe from LA, Long Beach, Burbank, and San Diego, among a few others. And the artifactoids. Lots of 70s gas stations visible in this one. Rockford even stops at a Union 76 in this episode. But I wanted to look at Los Angeles International Airport, with its Googie design theme building depicted as the airport to which Rockford returns from New Jersey. Once they cut away from the stock footage, he's depicted in a rather unremarkable hallway. Wikipedia states that in this period, Colombo shot at LAX, so it's conceivable this was shot at LAX, aside from that plainness. Now, admittedly, I was a little under a year and a half old at the air date of the episode, but looking at the internet now, I can't find any images of LAX that didn't have at least a raised ceiling in the concourses and ticketing areas. It's possible they erected a set, or even used a permanent airport set on a backlot somewhere, but the presence of the Holiday Airlines desk has me wondering whether the interiors were in fact shot at Burbank or Long Beach. A few more image searches later, and bingo, it appears that this scene for this episode was almost definitely shot at Burbank Airport. What worked? After the first few more lackluster car chases in recent episodes, the sequences in this episode where Rockford loses tails feel more urgent and interesting. I think they seem to portray more speed. Plus, there were intricacies involved in losing the tails that were of more interest than a simple one car driving fast away from another. I like the realism, also, that Rockford isn't always spot on when recalling license plate numbers later on. What didn't work? Well, if the writers intended us to believe that Susan Jameson killed Mark, as Rockford told Warner, it didn't work. In my opinion, at that point, it was rather obvious that Warner was the trigger man, but I'm not entirely certain they meant us to believe it, in which case, it was alright. Next time is an episode called The Big Ripoff, and it would be great if Rockford was using his demonstrated knowledge of cons to bust a con man. Happy hunting! You have been listening to the One Idjit's Thoughts On podcast, produced by Paul Mackey in association with QuadrupleZ.com. Theme music is Too Good by Jack Mangan and is used by permission from him. If you would like to hear other podcasts by me, you might try the Ghostlight podcast, a completed introcast about the TV series Slings and Arrows, or Idjitcast, an introcast for the TV series Supernatural. Both can be found on fine podcasting listening software everywhere or at QuadrupleZ.com.
Nothing's tough, but so are we. Let's make our own memories.
Seriously, I knew it wasn't the first bump the Scion had taken, and I counted at least 2 other colors of paint on his bumper, so really, letting it go felt like the easiest.